Hey there, I'm Mark, just your regular guy who happens to dabble in software engineering. My life was pretty standard, until that one week turned everything upside down. So, let me take you back to when it all started. I was out in Europe for this big tech seminar, the kind that has you wearing name tags and pretending to understand accents from 6 different countries. It was supposed to be this week-long affair, but, as luck would have it, things wrapped up a day early. Most folks would be bummed about losing a day in Europe, but me? All I could think about was getting back to Linda, my wife. We've been hitched for 15 years, and she's one of those school teachers that kids and parents love, a real gem. I'm standing there at the seminar, and my boss, this no-nonsense guy who rarely cracks a smile, comes up and says, "Great job, Mark. You can head home early if you want." I'm thinking, heck yeah, I'm getting out of here. But here's the catch, I didn't tell Linda. I thought, why not surprise her? You see, we're that couple who still tries to keep things exciting, surprise dates, impromptu road trips, the whole shebang. So, there I am, hustling through the airport, trying to catch an earlier flight. But, of course, it couldn't be that easy. My usual airport is an hour north of our cozy little suburban home, but I end up finding a flight to this smaller airport, almost 2 hours to the south. Never used it before, but hey, adventure, right? I get on the flight, it's cramped, my knees are hugging my chest, and the guy next to me is snoring like a bear. But I'm buzzing with excitement, thinking about Linda's face when she sees me. I land, grab a rental car, one of those tiny things that you pray doesn't fall apart on the highway, and start my midnight road trip back home. Now, picture this. I'm pulling into our driveway, it's just shy of midnight, and the street's quiet, like one of those scenes from a movie where you know something's about to happen. But the house? It's dark. Pitch black. And Linda's car? Nowhere in sight. My heart's doing this funny little dance in my chest, not the good kind. I'm lugging my suitcase inside, trying to make sense of it. Where could she be at this hour, right? I'm not one to jump to conclusions, so I fish out my phone and dial her number. It rings, and finally, she picks up on the 3rd ring. Her voice is groggy, like I just woke her up. "Hey, hun, just checking in. Everything okay?" I ask, trying to sound casual. She's all, "Yeah, it's past midnight, I was sleeping. See you at the airport tomorrow morning, right?" Now, I'm standing there, phone in hand, feeling like I've just walked into a weird movie. I'm like, sleeping, but not at home, I play it cool, though. Yeah, see you tomorrow, I stay, and we hang up. But get this. I call our home phone, and guess what? It rings just fine. So, the whole phone's broken story? Not adding up. I'm not Sherlock Holmes or anything, but something's fishy. So, I start doing the only logical thing. I search the house. Under the bed, in the closets, the usual hiding spots. But nope, no Linda, no nothing. Just me and a whole lot of silence. So, there I am, sitting in our dark living room, thinking, what now, Mark? I've always considered myself a pretty sharp guy, not easily fooled. But right then, I couldn't shake off the feeling that I was missing a huge piece of the puzzle. And that, my friends, is where it all began. Little did I know, that night was just the opening act of a show I never bought tickets for. Alright, so where did I leave off? Oh yeah, sitting in my dark living room, feeling like the lead in a mystery movie I never auditioned for. So, I decide it's time for some good old-fashioned detective work. And by detective work, I mean sitting on the couch, trying to piece together the puzzle with a bag of stale potato chips. It's getting late, or early, depending on how you look at it, and I'm just about ready to call it a night when I spot something on the kitchen table. It's a receipt from some fancy hotel downtown, dated for that very night. Now, I'm no genius, but I know Linda wouldn't be at a hotel for a school project. My mind's racing with possibilities, none of them good. But I needed to know, So, I do what any reasonable person would do at 1 a.m. I drive to the hotel. I'm half hoping I'm wrong, that there's a perfectly logical explanation for all this. I get to the hotel, and it's one of those places with a shiny lobby and a doorman who looks at you like you're lost. I wander in, trying to blend in with the late-night crowd. And there, in the corner of the lobby lounge, is Linda. But she's not alone. She's laughing and chatting with some guy I've never seen before. He's got that. I spend more time in the gym than at work, look. Now, I'm standing there, feeling like I've been sucker punched. I duck behind a potted plant. Classic spy move, right? And listen in. And let me tell you, the things I heard. It's like listening to a soap opera, but worse, because it's your life. They're talking about sneaking away for weekend trips, secret messages, the whole 9 yards. My head's spinning, and I'm trying to process it all. It's like one of those moments when you realize the quiet life you thought you had is anything but. I could have walked up to them, made a scene, but I didn't. I had a different plan brewing. I sneak out of the hotel and drive back home, my mind working overtime. By the time I get back, it's almost dawn, and I've got it. A plan to bring this whole charade out into the open. So, there I was, back at home, reeling from what I'd just seen at the hotel. Linda, my Linda, laughing it up with some mystery guy. Felt like a gut punch, you know? But I wasn't about to let this slide without digging deeper. No way. The next day, instead of confronting her or blowing up her phone, I play it cool. I call her up and spin a tale. Hey, hun, looks like this seminar's going into overtime. Won't be back till next week. She sounds relieved, says she'll miss me, but I can hear that edge in her voice, the one that says she's got other plans. I start tailing her, keeping it low-key. Sounds crazy, right? But I had to know the full story. Turns out, Linda's got a whole routine. Fancy dinners, late nights, the works. And always with Mr. Muscles, as I've started calling him in my head. Each day, I'm piecing together more of the puzzle. They're not just flings or one-time things. This is serious. They're talking about future plans, sneaking away for weekends, even joking about a life together. It's like watching someone else's life fall apart, except it's mine. And the more I find out, the angrier I get. But anger's like a fire, right? Gotta channel it right, or it burns everything down. So, I hatch a plan. A plan to expose this whole charade for what it is, a sham. I don't call our friends or family, not yet. First, I need solid proof, something undeniable. I'm talking photos, receipts, the kind of evidence you see in courtroom dramas. It's meticulous work, tracking their movements, snapping pics without being seen. I feel like a character in a spy novel, only the stakes are my marriage. So, there I am. Mark the makeshift detective, tailing Linda and her gym buddy turned lover, whom I've dubbed Mr. Muscles in my head. Each day, I'm gathering bits and pieces, snapshots of their secret world. It's like putting together a jigsaw puzzle, except every piece is a stab in the heart. During my sleuthing, I stumble upon something, or rather, someone, interesting. Mr. Muscles has a wife. Yeah, plot thickens, right? She's this elegant woman, living in the suburbs, probably unaware her husband is playing Casanova in the city. Now, I'm thinking, Mark, you've got to meet this lady. But how? I can't just knock on her door and say, hey, our spouses are having an affair. So, I cook up a plan. I find out where she works, a local art gallery, and plan a chance encounter. I walk in one afternoon, pretending to be an art enthusiast. There she is, graceful, maybe a bit lonely. We strike up a conversation about some abstract painting. I'm nodding and smiling, not understanding a thing about it. We get to talking, and I gently steer the conversation towards personal life. She mentions her husband, how he's often away for business. My inside's screaming, if only you knew, lady. I keep visiting the gallery, building a rapport with her. Then, one day, I drop the bomb. I think our spouses might be more than just colleagues, I say, showing her a photo of Linda and Mr. Muscles a bit too cozy at a cafe. She's shocked, devastated. I can see the realization dawning on her, the pieces falling into place in her mind. But she's strong, you know? Doesn't crumble. Instead, she asks, what do we do now? That's when I lay out my plan. Let's expose them, but in a way they'd never see coming, I suggest. She's hesitant at first, but then there's this fire in her eyes. She's in. So, there I am, with all this evidence of Linda's infidelity, feeling like my whole world's flipped upside down. But I'm not about to let this slide without making a statement, a big one. I start plotting a grand reveal, something that'll show everyone the truth about Linda and Mr. Muscles. I decide to throw a surprise gathering at our house, the place where they often meet up, thinking they're safe in our little love nest. I call up our friends, family, even some of Linda's colleagues. Tell them we're throwing an impromptu party to celebrate an unexpected business success of mine. Everyone's excited, praising me for my hard work, completely unaware of the real drama about to unfold. The plan's simple. Have everyone hide in the living room, lights off, waiting for Linda and Mr. Muscles to walk into their not-so-secret rendezvous. Then, bam, lights on, and the truth's out for all to see. The day arrives, and our house is buzzing with whispered anticipation. Friends and family are tucked away, some hiding behind furniture, others in adjoining rooms, all waiting for the big moment. Linda and Mr. Muscles, clueless about the setup, stroll in, lost in their own little world. They're laughing, touching, starting to get real cozy, thinking they're alone. I'm watching from my hiding spot, heart pounding, waiting for the perfect moment. And then, when they're just about to cross a line they can't come back from, I hit the lights. The room erupts in gasps and murmurs. Linda and Mr. Muscles freeze like deer in headlights. The look of shock, embarrassment, guilt, it's all there, painted across their faces. Our friends and family are in utter disbelief. Some are shaking their heads, others looking away, unable to believe what they're seeing. Linda's sister, who's always been her champion, looks like she's about to cry. My best friend, who's known us since college, just stares, his expression a mix of anger and pity. Linda's colleagues, who've always seen her as the perfect professional, are whispering among themselves, their respect for her visibly crumbling. And there, in the midst of it all, is Linda's mother, her face a picture of shock and disappointment. As for Mr. Muscles, he's stammering, trying to make sense of the situation, but there's no talking his way out of this one. His eyes dart around the room, looking for an escape, but there's none to be found. Linda's trying to speak, to explain, but her words are lost in the chaos of the moment. The truth's out, and there's no hiding from it now. The facade of the perfect marriage, the ideal life, it's all come crashing down in the most public way possible. The aftermath is a blur. Some guests leave, unable to handle the tension. Others stay, offering me their support, their expressions a mix of sympathy and disbelief. Linda's left standing there, her secret life exposed, her world shattered just as much as mine. And me? I'm feeling a whirlwind of emotions. Relief that the truth's finally out, anger at the betrayal, sadness at what's been lost. But above all, there's a sense of closure. The lies are over, and now, it's time to start picking up the pieces. The room's still echoing with the last traces of the night's drama. There I am, standing in the wreckage of what used to be my life, surrounded by the stunned faces of friends and family. Linda's standing there, looking like she's been hit by a freight train. Mr. Muscles, well, he's already slinked out the door, tail between his legs. The air's thick with tension, unspoken questions hanging like heavy clouds. Linda's sister, Karen, is the first to break the silence. She's always been the peacemaker, the one who tries to find the good in everyone. But even she can't mask her disappointment. Linda, how could you? She whispers, more in sorrow than in anger. Linda's colleagues, some of them close friends of ours for years, shuffle uncomfortably. I can see the respect they once had for her dissolving in front of my eyes. It's one thing to hear rumors, it's another to see the truth laid bare in your living room. Then there's Linda's mother, a stern woman who's always valued family above all else. The look she gives Linda is one I can't quite decipher. It's a mix of anger, heartbreak, and maybe, just maybe, a hint of understanding. But she doesn't say a word. She doesn't have to. As the night wears on, the guests begin to leave, offering me sympathetic pats on the back and awkward, mournful looks. I'm left alone with Linda and the deafening silence. She tries to speak, to explain, but what's there to say? The trust is broken, the damage done. Finally, she says something that catches me off guard. I never meant to hurt you, Mark. I lost my way. Her voice is a silence like a knife. I want to be angry, to shout and rage at her. But all I feel is a profound sadness, a sense of loss so deep it's almost physical. I know, I reply, and it's the truth. I do know. People don't just wake up one day and decide to wreck their lives. It happens bit by bit, choice by choice. And maybe, in some way, I played a part in it too. The house feels empty as the last guest leaves. It's just Linda and me, standing amidst the ruins of our marriage. We talk, not about us, but about practical things, living arrangements, finances, how we'll explain this to our friends and family. As dawn breaks, Linda packs a bag and leaves. I watch her drive away, and there's a moment where I almost call out to her, ask her to stay and work it out. But some things, once broken, can't be fixed. And maybe, just maybe, it's better this way. In the silence of the morning, I sit down with a cup of coffee, staring at the mess in the living room, the remnants of the party that wasn't really a party. And I realize that this is it, the first day of the rest of my life. It's a daunting thought, starting over. But there's also a sense of freedom, a chance to rebuild, to find out who I am when I'm not part of Mark and Linda. It's not going to be easy, but then again, the best things in life rarely are. So, with the morning sun streaming through the window, I make a promise to myself, to learn from this, to grow, and to never lose sight of who I am again. Because in the end, that's all we really have, ourselves, our choices, and the paths we choose to walk. The days following the party-turned-revelation are a blur of emotions and decisions. The house, once filled with love and laughter, now echoes with the silence of absence. I go through the motions, dealing with the fallout, answering calls from concerned friends and family, but inside, I'm numb. But life, as it tends to do, keeps moving. I return to work, throwing myself into projects and meetings, anything to keep my mind occupied. My colleagues, aware of the situation, offer a mix of sympathy and space. It's appreciated, but there's this unspoken understanding that the Mark and Linda they knew is no more. In the quiet of the evenings, I find myself reflecting on everything. How did we get here? Were there signs I missed? Could I have done something differently? It's a dangerous spiral, and I have to constantly remind myself not to get sucked into the abyss of what-ifs. A couple of weeks later, I get a call from Karen, Linda's sister. She's been caught in the middle of this, trying to support Linda while also understanding my pain. We meet for coffee, a neutral ground to talk. Karen looks tired, worn down by the family drama. She's struggling. Mark, Karen says softly, stirring her coffee. Not that it excuses anything, but she's lost, too. I nod, understanding. Despite everything, I can't help but feel a pang of concern for Linda. I hope she finds what she's looking for, I reply, and I mean it. Karen gives me a small, sad smile. And you, Mark, what are you looking for now? Her question catches me off guard. What am I looking for? Redemption? Closure? A new beginning? I'm not sure. All I know is that I can't stay anchored to the past. The conversation with Karen is a turning point. It makes me realize that holding on to anger and resentment won't change what happened. It's time to let go, not for Linda, but for me. I start to make changes, small at first. Rearranging the furniture, taking down some old photos, creating a space that feels more like mine and less like ours. It's therapeutic in a way, a physical manifestation of the internal changes I'm going through. I reconnect with old friends, some of whom I'd lost touch with over the years. We meet for drinks, catch up on life, and their company reminds me of who I was before Linda. It's like rediscovering parts of myself that I had forgotten. One evening, I find myself at a local community center, signing up for a cooking class. It's something I've always wanted to do but never got around to. Surrounded by strangers, all there for different reasons, I feel a sense of camaraderie. We're all here, trying to learn something new, to add a little flavor to our lives. As the weeks turn into months, the raw pain of the betrayal fades into a dull ache. It's still there, a part of my story, but it no longer defines me. I'm finding joy in small things. A well-cooked meal, a night out with friends, a quiet evening with a good book. And then, there's Sarah, Mr. Muscle's wife. We've kept in touch, two people bound by a shared experience of betrayal. There's a comfort in our interactions, an understanding that doesn't need words. We meet occasionally for coffee, offering each other support and a listening ear. One evening, as we're laughing over a shared joke, I realize how much I've come to value her company. She's smart, funny, and resilient. There's a connection there, something that goes beyond our shared pain. But I'm cautious, aware that both of us are still healing. As the year comes to a close, I find myself reflecting on the journey I've been on. It's been a road marked by pain, discovery, and growth. I'm not the same person I was a year ago, and that's okay. I've learned that life is unpredictable, but it's also full of possibilities. I don't know what the future holds, but I'm ready to face it. With each passing day, I'm building a new life, one that's authentically mine. And for the first time in a long time, I'm excited to see what comes next. If you liked what you've read and want to stay updated on more stories, insights, or just life reflections, go ahead and hit that like button. It really helps me out and lets me know you're there and interested. And if you haven't already, consider subscribing. That way, you won't miss out on any new chapters in this ever-evolving story of life, love, and learning. Trust me, there's a lot more to come, and I'd love for you to be part of this journey. So, like, subscribe, and join me as we navigate the twists and turns of this adventure called life. Thanks for being here, and I can't wait to share more with you. The moment I saw that text, I knew something was up. Chris, some dude from her office. The message seemed harmless enough, but you don't get that twist in your gut over nothing. Sarah, always glued to her phone lately, was humming a different tune, and it wasn't for me. I'd ask about her day, and she'd just shrug, her mind obviously miles away. It wasn't like her, not the Sarah I married. I remember sitting across from her at breakfast, watching her smile at her phone. That smile used to be mine. Who's Chris? I asked casually, trying not to let my suspicion show. Oh, just a colleague, she brushed it off, but her voice had this high pitch it gets when she's not quite on the level. It started eating at me, you know? I'd lie awake, her texts pinging all night. She thought I didn't notice. But I did. I noticed everything. The way she'd light up when she typed, the quick screen switches when I walked past. Once, I caught a glimpse of her phone, messages pouring in from Chris. Can't wait to see you, one read. My heart sank. I had to confront her. I couldn't just sit there playing the clueless husband. So, one night, as she slipped into the shower, I asked straight up about Chris. Her reaction was a telltale sign. Defensive. A bit too quick to deny anything was going on. He's just a friend from work, John. You're being paranoid. But her eyes, they didn't match her words. The more she denied it, the more obsessed I became. I couldn't shake off the feeling that she was drifting away from me, getting sucked into this world where I didn't exist. Sarah, my Sarah, who used to find any excuse to spend time together, was now always busy, always tired, always preoccupied with her phone. I started to question everything. Our late-night talks, our weekend plans, our simple moments of laughter, they all seemed to fade into the background. It was like living with a stranger who wore my wife's face. The woman I loved, who shared my dreams, my bed, was sharing parts of herself with someone else. And the worst part? I was losing her, bit by bit, text by text. The thought kept me up at night, this nagging suspicion that turned into a silent scream in my head. It wasn't just about the texts anymore. It was about us, what we were, what we become. I lay there, next to her, feeling miles apart, wondering if every "I love you" was just a placeholder for something or someone else. That's how it all started. A simple text spiraling into a whirlpool of doubt and secrecy. And there I was, right in the middle, trying to hold on to the remnants of a marriage that was slipping through my fingers like sand. I had this nagging feeling, right? Something was off. Sarah, my wife, always had her phone with her, clutching it like some lifeline. At first, I tried to brush it off, but man, it was like a splinter in my brain. So, I started checking her phone. Yeah, I know, not the coolest move, but I had to know. Every time I grabbed her phone, it was clean. Too clean. It was like she was one step ahead, always erasing any trace of whatever it was. That's when I knew for sure, something was up. She was up to something, and it wasn't good. Then one day, it hit me. She had this new app, looked like a regular calculator or something. But when I tried to use it, it asked for a password. Bingo. A secret app for messaging. Clever, Sarah, really clever. But why? Why all the secrecy? I felt like I was in some sort of spy movie, except it was my life unraveling on screen. And Chris, this guy from her office, he was suddenly everywhere. Well, not physically, but in every whispered phone call, every time she laughed at her screen. I asked her about him once, and she just shrugged it off. But I could tell, something was going on between them. I remember this one time, she said she was going out for lunch with her colleagues. But later, I found a receipt in her purse. Just for two, Sarah and Chris had their secret lunch, a cozy little rendezvous. The thought of it made my blood boil. She was slipping away from me, and all I could do was watch. At home, things were getting tense. I couldn't look at her without wondering what she was hiding. Every smile she gave me felt fake. I started to pull back, building this wall between us. I didn't want to, but the anger, the hurt, it was too much. And it got worse. They started meeting after work. Sarah, who used to rush home to spend time together, was now always working late. It was like a punch in the gut every time she said it. I knew she was with him, laughing, sharing moments that were supposed to be ours. I tried to confront her a few times, but she was a master at dodging questions. Always had an excuse, always ready to turn the tables on me. Why don't you trust me, John? She'd say, trust? How could I? With every secret meeting, every hidden message, trust was the last thing I could offer. It was like living with a ghost. She was there, but not really. We shared a house, a bed, but we were worlds apart. And in her world, I was the outsider, desperately trying to claw my way back in. Every day, I watched her drift further away, into a life where I didn't exist. And every day, I lost a little more of the woman I loved. It was a slow, painful realization that I was fighting a battle I had already lost. That night, the suspicion was eating me alive. I had to know. So, I followed Sarah. Yeah, that's right, me, lurking in the shadows like some detective from a cheap novel. But what I saw, or rather, what I almost saw, was enough to confirm my fears. There she was, sneaking around, looking over her shoulder. She was meeting him, Chris. I was just a shadow away from catching them red-handed. But she slipped away, just barely. It scared her, I could tell. The next few days, she was jumpy, like a cat on a hot tin roof. But she didn't stop. No, Sarah didn't stop seeing Chris. It was like she was addicted to whatever they had, and nothing, not even the risk of getting caught, could make her quit. So, I did something crazy. I planned a surprise weekend trip for us. A desperate attempt to rekindle whatever was left of our marriage. I took her to this cozy little cabin in the woods, the kind of place we used to love. It was beautiful, peaceful, the perfect setting to remind her of us. But the whole time, she was distant. It was like I was there with a stranger who looked like my wife. I tried everything: romantic dinners, long walks, talking late into the night. But she was miles away, lost in thoughts that clearly didn't include me. Every attempt I made to bridge the gap between us felt like it was just widening the chasm. And then we got back. Back to reality, back to the mess. And it got messier. She found out that Chris, Mr. Perfect, was seeing someone else. I saw it in her eyes, the hurt, the betrayal. But it wasn't me she felt betrayed by. It was him. That stung more than I can say. In a way, I was glad she found out. I thought maybe this would be a wake-up call, a chance for us to start over. But things don't always work out the way you hope. She was hurt, yes, but not enough to turn back to me. Not enough to undo everything that had happened. I watched her struggle with it, torn between anger and longing. And all I could do was stand by, helpless, as she grappled with the reality of her affair. The woman I loved, caught in a web of lies and deceit she had spun herself, was now facing the consequences. And I, the bystander in my own marriage, could only watch as the drama unfolded. When suspicion creeps in, it festers like a bad wound. That's what happened to me. I couldn't shake off the feeling that Sarah was still seeing Chris, even after our weekend getaway. So, I started digging a bit deeper, checking her credit card bills. Call it a hunch, but something was definitely off. The bills were too clean, almost like she was covering her tracks. And I was right. Sarah had switched tactics. She was using cash now for her meetups with Chris. Smart move, but not smart enough. I knew her too well. Knew that her sudden need for cash wasn't for some innocent shopping sprees. The pieces were falling into place, and they weren't painting a pretty picture. Their affair, it was getting more daring, more reckless. I heard bits and pieces, caught whispers of their secret meetings. They were no longer content with just texts and lunch breaks. No, they were meeting in places that spelled danger in big, bold letters. It was like they were addicted to the thrill, the risk of getting caught. But what they didn't know was that I was onto them. I couldn't just sit back and watch my marriage crumble into dust. So, I did something I never thought I'd do. I hired a private investigator. Yeah, it sounds extreme, but desperate times call for desperate measures. I gave the pie all the info he needed. Follow her, track her movements, find out what she's up to, I told him. It felt surreal, like I was a character in some gritty detective movie. But this was my life, and I needed answers. The investigator got to work, blending into the background, unseen, unnoticed. Sarah had no clue that her every move was being watched, documented. And me? I was waiting, bracing myself for the inevitable storm that was about to hit. Every day, the investigator would update me. Locations, times, sneaky rendezvous, the whole sordid affair laid bare. And every detail was like a knife, twisting deeper into my heart. The woman I loved, the woman I shared my life with, was living a double life. And the worst part? I was the outsider, the fool left in the dark. But not anymore. Now I had the upper hand. I had proof, cold, hard evidence of her betrayal. It was only a matter of time before I confronted her, before I brought the whole charade crashing down. And as I waited for that moment, a part of me mourned the loss of the life I thought we had, the future we were supposed to share. It was all slipping away, piece by painful piece, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. The moment Sarah told me about her sudden work conference, I knew it was a lie. Call it intuition or just knowing your partner too well, but I could tell she was up to something. And when Chris suggested a weekend getaway around the same time, the pieces clicked. It wasn't rocket science to figure out what was really going on. I felt a mix of anger and sadness, but I kept my cool. Have a good trip, I told her, my voice steady, hiding the storm inside. The minute she left, I called the private investigator. She's going on a trip this weekend. I want to know everything, I said. It was a point of no return. The investigator did his job well. He followed Sarah discreetly, capturing photos of her and Chris together. Every picture was a blow to my heart, a visual confirmation of her betrayal. It was happening, right in front of my eyes, yet miles away. Meanwhile, at the getaway, things were escalating between Sarah and Chris. I didn't need the investigator to tell me that. I knew Sarah. This wasn't just a fling for her anymore. She was in deep, maybe even considering leaving me for him. The thought alone was like a cold hand squeezing my heart. But nothing prepared me for when the investigator reported back with all the evidence. The photos, the details of their intimate moments, it was all laid out in front of me, undeniable and raw. Seeing Sarah with another man, talking about a future together, it tore me apart. I felt a mix of grief and rage, a sense of loss so profound it was suffocating. There she was, the woman I had vowed to spend my life with, planning a life with someone else. It was more than just an affair now, it was a betrayal of everything we had built together. I sat there, looking at those photos, and it felt like I was watching my marriage crumble into dust. It's one thing to suspect your spouse of cheating, quite another to have it confirmed with such brutal clarity. I was devastated, lost in a whirl of emotions I couldn't fully comprehend. How had it come to this? How had we gone from loving spouses to this twisted, painful mess? I had to face the truth, as bitter as it was. Sarah wasn't the person I thought I knew. She had changed, or maybe she had always been this way, and I just refused to see it. Either way, our marriage was on its last legs, and there was no going back from here. It was a defining moment, a crossroads. I knew I had to confront her, to bring everything out into the open. But part of me dreaded that confrontation. It wasn't just about exposing her lies, it was about admitting to myself that our marriage, our life together, was probably over. And that realization was the hardest pill to swallow. The day I confronted Sarah, it felt like I was walking through a nightmare. I had the photos, the reports, all the evidence of her affair right in my hands. We need to talk, I said, my voice steady despite the chaos inside. She looked at me, a flicker of fear in her eyes. I laid it all out, the photos, the investigator's findings. It was undeniable, yet she denied everything. It's not what it looks like, she said, but we both knew it was exactly what it looked like. Her words were like hollow echoes, bouncing off the walls of our once happy home. Meanwhile, Chris, the other guy in this mess, was losing his nerve. He wanted to lay low, avoid getting caught any further. Sarah told me about it later, how he was panicking, scared of the consequences. Funny, how brave people can be until they're facing the music. In the midst of this storm, I did something unexpected. I suggested renewing our vows. Maybe it was a desperate attempt to salvage what was left of our marriage, or maybe I just needed to know if there was anything worth saving. Sarah was taken aback, her guilt and conflict written all over her face. But her mind was elsewhere, with Chris. She had made up her mind to leave me for him. My wife, the woman I had shared my life with, was ready to walk away. It was a tough pill to swallow, knowing that I was fighting a losing battle. Before she could break the news to me, I planned a surprise vow renewal ceremony. I wanted to remind her of the love we once shared, of the promises we made to each other. It was a grand gesture, a last-ditch effort to win her back. The day of the ceremony, I watched her walk towards me, a mix of emotions on her face. There was love, yes, but also guilt, sadness, and a hint of resignation. We stood there, in front of our friends and family, about to renew vows that felt like they were hanging by a thread. It was a surreal moment, both of us caught in a web of lies and half-truths, trying to hold on to something that was slipping away. I wanted to believe that we could start over, that we could rebuild our relationship. But deep down, I knew it was a fantasy, a fleeting dream that was about to be shattered by the harsh light of reality. As we exchanged vows, I looked into Sarah's eyes, searching for a sign, any sign, that we could make it through this. But all I saw was a woman torn between two worlds, struggling to choose between the life she had and the life she wanted. And in that moment, I realized that no matter what I did, I might have already lost her. Standing there during the vow renewal ceremony, saying words that felt like ash in my mouth, I couldn't shake the feeling of being a complete fraud. Sarah's eyes, usually so full of life, were clouded with a mixture of guilt and detachment. It was like we were actors in a play, performing our roles for an audience that believed in a love story that no longer existed. After the ceremony, the facade crumbled. Sarah, with a voice that trembled despite her resolve, told me she wanted a divorce. It was a blow, sure, but not unexpected. The pain, though, was real and sharp, like a physical wound. It was the end of a chapter, the end of us. But the twists in this tale weren't over. After Sarah told Chris about the divorce, he began to distance himself. It struck me as odd, wasn't this what he wanted? Or so I thought. Sarah was confused, hurt by his sudden coldness. It was like the ground was shifting beneath her feet. Then came the bombshell that turned everything on its head. Chris, the other man, was actually a private investigator. I had hired him to find out the truth about Sarah, but never in my wildest dreams did I imagine this outcome. It was a game of deception, and we were all pawns. When Sarah found out, her world fell apart. She had been played, her emotions manipulated in a game she didn't even know she was part of. The realization hit her hard. The man she thought she loved, the future she envisioned, it was all a carefully orchestrated lie. For me, it was a mix of vindication and sorrow. Yes, I had my answers, but at what cost? Our marriage, once built on love and trust, was now a pile of rubble, destroyed by lies and deceit. And in the midst of this wreckage was Sarah, a woman I once thought I knew, now a stranger, her world crumbling around her. It was a bitter victory, if it could be called a victory at all. The truth had come out, but it left destruction in its wake. As I watched Sarah grappling with the reality of her situation, I couldn't help but feel a pang of regret. Yes, she had betrayed me, but the web of lies I had woven was no less deceitful. In this twisted game, there were no winners, only broken hearts and shattered illusions. We were all casualties of a war we didn't know we were fighting. And as the dust settled, the only thing left was the cold, hard truth, lying bare and unadorned, a testament to the wreckage of what once was. The day I served Sarah the divorce papers, it felt like the final nail in the coffin of our marriage. I had all the evidence I needed, neatly compiled, a testament to the betrayal and lies. It was a hard thing to do, but it was necessary. There was no going back from here. The divorce process was messy, to say the least. It was a tangle of legal battles, emotional confrontations, and a constant reminder of the life we were tearing apart. Sarah was losing much in the process, our shared assets, the comfortable life we had built together. It was a steep price for her actions, and it pained me to see it, even though I knew it was the consequence of her choices. Then, Chris, the guy she thought she loved, the private investigator I had hired, vanished into thin air. And with him, a significant chunk of Sarah's savings. It was the ultimate betrayal for her, a cruel twist in an already painful saga. She was left reeling, not only emotionally but now financially as well. Alone, with her world crumbling around her, Sarah faced not just the financial ruin but also the public humiliation. Our once private life was now fodder for gossip, the details of our messy divorce spreading like wildfire. She had to bear the weight of judgmental stares, whispered rumors, and the harsh reality of her actions coming to light. At work, where she once held a position of respect, the rumors started to spread. Colleagues who used to greet her with smiles now offered her nothing but cold shoulders and pitiful glances. It was a harsh fall from grace, and I knew it was taking its toll on her. I watched from a distance, torn between anger and a residual sense of protectiveness. This was not the ending I had envisioned for us when we first said our vows. We were supposed to grow old together, not tear each other apart in a whirlwind of deceit and revenge. The sadness of it all was overwhelming. Here we were, two people who once promised to love and cherish each other, now embroiled in a bitter battle, leaving scars that would likely never heal. The love that once bound us together had been replaced by hurt and resentment, a painful reminder of what we had lost. As the divorce proceedings dragged on, it became clear that the life we had built was dissolving before our eyes. It was a sobering realization, one that came with its share of regrets and what-ifs. But the path we had chosen was irreversible, and all that was left was to move forward, each of us carrying the weight of our broken past. When the scandal hit, it was like a domino effect. First, I lost my job. The company I'd given years to, the career I had built from the ground up, gone in the blink of an eye. They said it was because of the scandal, the bad press. I knew it was more than that. It was the betrayal, the lies. It didn't matter that I was good at my job. All that mattered was the story. Then came the isolation. Friends who used to call every week, who I thought would stand by me through thick and thin, started distancing themselves. Invitations dried up, calls went unanswered. I was becoming an outcast, a pariah. The whispers and sideways glances were everywhere I went. It was a loneliness I had never known, a solitude imposed by the world. The divorce was a landslide defeat. John, my husband, got everything. The house, the car, most of our shared assets. I was left with nothing, a shell of the life we had built together. It was a harsh reality to face, sitting in a half-empty apartment, surrounded by the remnants of a life that no longer existed. In desperation, I tried to reach out to Chris, the man I thought I loved, the man who had been nothing but a pawn in a game I didn't even know I was playing. But he was gone, vanished without a trace. No answers, no closure, just a gaping void where he once was. It was a bitter pill to swallow, realizing that I had been nothing more than a mark in his investigation. And then, as if things couldn't get any worse, the legal troubles started. I was facing charges for fraud and deception, a consequence of the tangled web of lies that had enveloped my life. The court dates, the lawyers, the endless paperwork, it was overwhelming. Every step into that courtroom was a reminder of how far I had fallen, of the mistakes I had made. It was a downward spiral, a fall from grace that seemed to have no end. Each day brought a new challenge, a new reminder of the mess I had made of my life. The scandal had taken everything from me, my job, my friends, my marriage. And now, it threatened to take my freedom too. As I sat alone in that apartment, facing the consequences of my actions, I couldn't help but reflect on the choices I had made. The lies, the affair, the destruction of my marriage, it all seemed so senseless now. I was paying the price for my mistakes, a price that seemed too steep to bear. But there was no turning back. The past couldn't be undone, the damage couldn't be repaired. All I could do was face the future, however bleak it seemed. The journey ahead was uncertain, fraught with challenges and hardships. But it was a journey I had to take, a path I had to walk, alone. Selling my stuff just to scrape by wasn't something I ever thought I'd have to do. There I was, a grown man, hawking my belongings like it was a yard sale. Each item sold felt like a piece of me was being chipped away. My guitar, the one I used to play for Sarah on lazy Sunday afternoons, gone. The watch my dad left me, gone. It was like erasing parts of my life, just to keep the lights on. Meanwhile, Sarah was sinking even deeper. She was living in this tiny, run-down apartment, a far cry from the comfortable life we once shared. I heard about it through the grapevine. Part of me felt sorry for her, but another part, the hurt part, thought it was just desserts. As for me, I was trying to move on. I started seeing someone new, a lovely woman who knew nothing of my past troubles. We were out there, just living life, unburdened by the shadows of my failed marriage. But I'd be lying if I said it didn't sting to know that Sarah was out there, alone and struggling. Then came the final twist, the one that knocked the wind out of me. I found out that Chris, the guy Sarah had an affair with, was in on it with me from the start. He was a private investigator I'd hired to catch her cheating. When Sarah found out, it was like the world dropped out from under her. It was a cruel revelation, one that made the whole sordid affair even more twisted. Sitting in my now sparsely furnished apartment, I couldn't shake off the guilt. Yes, Sarah had betrayed me, but the lengths I went to expose her, it didn't sit right. I had my revenge, but at what cost? There was no satisfaction, no sense of victory, just a hollow feeling where my heart used to be. I thought about Sarah, alone in her dingy apartment, her life in tatters. I wondered if she regretted everything, if she ever thought about what we had, what we could have had. As for me, I was left with a new life, but one that was built on the ruins of the old. Moving on wasn't just about finding someone new, it was about living with the choices I'd made, the actions I'd taken. The story of me and Sarah, it ended not with a bang, but with a whimper. Two people, once so in love, now just two separate tales of caution and regret. I sat there, in my near-empty living room, the silence a stark reminder of everything that had gone wrong. It was a dramatic end, sure, but not a happy one. Just a man, his memories, and the cold truth of his betrayal has a taste, bitter and lingering. I found that out the day I came home early. You see, I'd been feeling off, like something in my life was out of sync. That day, the universe decided to show me what it was. I walked into my own house to find Sarah, my wife of 7 years, in Mark's arms. Mark, her smooth-talking coworker, whose only good trait was his ability to hide his snake-like nature. The shock hit me like a freight train. There they were, in our living room, tangled up in what used to be our favorite blanket. I remember how time seemed to slow down as I stood there, the image burning into my memory. Sarah's eyes met mine, wide with guilt. Mark, the coward, couldn't even look at me. I didn't say a word. What was there to say? I walked out, the sound of Sarah's pleading trailing behind me. In the weeks that followed, the fallout was swift and brutal. Sarah left, choosing Mark and his flashy lifestyle over our years together. She didn't just take her belongings, she took nearly everything we'd built together. Savings, investments, even the fancy china we got on our wedding day, all gone. I was left with an echo of a life we had shared, in a house that suddenly seemed too big and too empty. The struggle that came after was like wading through a swamp. I had to start from scratch. Finding a new job wasn't easy. Who wants to hire the guy who just got left for another man? But I managed to land a gig at a tech startup. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid the bills. I moved into a modest apartment, the kind where you could touch both walls if you stretched your arms out. But it was mine, and it was not filled with memories of Sarah. One day, I was grabbing a coffee when I overheard a conversation. Two guys were talking about Mark and Sarah. They mentioned a big house, fancy cars, and trips to places I couldn't even pronounce. A pang of something hit me, anger, maybe, or just plain old jealousy. It was hard to tell. That's when Alex stepped in. Alex, my best friend since college, who'd stuck by me through this mess. He proposed a trip to clear my head. Let's go hiking, he said. Get away from all this drama. He was right. I needed a break from the whispers, the pitying looks, and the empty apartment that echoed with what used to be. So, we planned a weekend getaway, somewhere remote and wild. A place where cell service was a myth, and the only drama was whether we'd run out of beer. As we packed our gear into Alex's beat-up car, I felt a weight lifting off my shoulders. Maybe it was the open road ahead or just the fact that I was doing something, anything, other than moping around. I was ready to leave it all behind, at least for a weekend. Little did I know, this trip would be more than just a distraction. It was the start of something new, a path I never expected to take. You wouldn't believe it. The way fate likes to play its twisted games. There I was, deep in the mountains with Alex, trying to forget the world. The air was crisp, the sky a perfect blue, not a single reminder of my old life in sight. That's until we decided to grab a meal at this fancy resort nearby. A little treat to ourselves, you know? And guess who we see sipping a cocktail by the pool? Sarah. Yeah, my ex-wife, in all her glory, looking like she just stepped out of a magazine. She saw us too. There was this split second where her eyes gave it all away, the surprise, the panic. But she masked it quickly, replaced it with that practiced, plastic smile. Came over. All breezy and light, like we were just old friends bumping into each other. She was all dolled up, dressed to the nines, flashing her new expensive jewelry. It was surreal, seeing her there, acting like she owned the place. But under all that, I could tell something was off. Her eyes didn't match her smile. They were tired, maybe even a bit scared. But she played her part well, showing off about this lavish lifestyle she and Mark were leading. I kept my cool, just nodded along, while Alex gave me these, can you believe this? Looks. We couldn't get out of there fast enough. Back on the trail, Alex couldn't stop talking about it. She's not happy, man, he kept saying. I didn't want to think about it. It was her choice, her life now. When we got back, life kicked back into gear. Work was waiting, and guess what? I landed a promotion. More responsibility, better pay, it was exactly what I needed. Felt like I was finally moving forward, you know? Then, out of the blue, Sarah calls me. Her voice was different, shaky. Said she was unhappy, that she missed us, missed our old life. It hit me like a ton of bricks, but what was I supposed to do? She made her choice. I told her I had to go, that there was a project waiting on my desk. It wasn't a lie. Work had become my refuge, a place where I didn't have to think about broken vows and lost years. I dove into it, headfirst, trying to drown out her words, her voice. I was done being the fallback guy, the safety net. It was time to rebuild, on my terms. So, I ignored her calls, her texts. Each new message left unread, a tiny victory. Sarah was part of a past I was trying to leave behind. I had a new role at work, new challenges. I needed to focus on that, on me. It was time to move on, for real this time. Talk about a day that flips your world upside down. It was a regular Tuesday, you know, buried in paperwork and endless emails. Then, out of nowhere, Sarah shows up at my office. Yeah, the same Sarah who left me for Mr. High and Mighty Mark. She looked different, eyes red, a bit disheveled, not the polished image she loved to show off. She was there, in the middle of my workplace, begging for forgiveness, tears and all. Man, was I conflicted. Part of me wanted to comfort her, the old part that remembered us before it all went south. But the other part, the part that got dragged through the mud, stayed cold. I kept my distance, told her this wasn't the place or time. She left, but the echo of her visit lingered like a bad smell. Later, over coffee, a coworker mentioned something about Mark that caught me off guard. Apparently, the guy was knee-deep in some illegal business stuff. Fraud. Money laundering. The works. I couldn't believe it. And Sarah? She was in the dark about it all. She'd jumped ship for a life that was built on a house of cards. In the midst of this chaos, there was Emily. We'd been working on a project together for a while. She was sharp, funny, and had this way of making even the dullest meetings bearable. We started grabbing lunch together, casual at first. But soon, those lunches turned into dinners, and dinners turned into something more. Emily was different. She wasn't about flashy things or high drama. She was real, grounded. She listened when I talked about my struggles, offered a smile that seemed to make the worst days better. It was refreshing, being with someone who valued me for who I was, not what I could offer. Dating again felt strange at first, like wearing a suit that didn't quite fit. But with Emily, it was easy. She had this way of looking at life, a positive spin on everything. And she believed in me, pushed me to aim higher at work, to take on challenges I'd normally shy away from. So, there I was, caught between my past with Sarah, a present that was tangled in rumors of crime and deceit, and a budding future with Emily. It was like standing at a crossroad, each path leading to a different destination. And let me tell you, the road I was starting to lean towards? It didn't include Sarah, tears or not. Just when you think you've seen it all, life throws a curveball that makes you question everything. Sarah's attempts to win me back were turning from sad to downright desperate. She'd call at odd hours, send messages filled with memories and regrets. I was trying to be sympathetic, but patience wears thin, especially when you're trying to move on. Meanwhile, things with Emily were getting serious. She was like a breath of fresh air, making me see a future I hadn't dared to imagine after Sarah left. We were connecting on a level one hadn't experienced before. So, we planned a trip together, a week in the mountains, hiking, exploring, and just enjoying each other's company. It was exactly what I needed, a chance to strengthen this new bond away from the daily grind. Now, here's the kicker. While we were away, enjoying nature in each other's company, Mark got arrested. Yeah, the same Mark that Sarah left me for. Turns out he wasn't just a smooth talker, he was a criminal. Fraud, embezzlement, you name it, he was involved. It was all over the news, but up in the mountains, Emily and I were blissfully unaware. We got back to a world turned upside down. Sarah was in the eye of the storm, left high and dry by Mark's criminal escapades. Financially ruined, socially ostracized, she'd lost everything chasing that glittering life Mark had promised. I felt a pang of something, pity, maybe? But it was mixed with a sense of vindication. Karma, as they say, has no menu, you get served what you deserve. The irony of it all was not lost on me. There I was, enjoying the simple things in life with Emily, while Sarah's world, built on lies and deceit, crumbled. It was a stark reminder of how different paths can lead to different destinations. Emily and I, we talked about it, of course. She was the kind of person who could find a lesson in everything, a silver lining in the darkest clouds. She said it was a reminder to cherish honesty and integrity, to value the real things in life. And she was right. As we unpacked our bags, putting away our camping gear, I realized how far I'd come from the day Sarah walked out. Life has a funny way of balancing things out. There I was, starting fresh, building something real and meaningful, while Sarah was back at square one, maybe even further back. I couldn't help but think about the choices we make, the paths we choose, and where they lead us. It was a chapter in my life I was ready to close, turning the page to something new, something better, with Emily by my side. Life's a crazy ride, isn't it? One day you're up, the next you're scraping rock bottom. That's what happened to Sarah. We got back from our trip, all relaxed and sun-kissed, only to find out she'd been evicted. Yeah, Sarah, once living the high life, was now on the streets. I couldn't wrap my head around it. I mean, this was the woman I'd shared a life with, now homeless because of choices she made. I won't lie, it tugged at my heartstrings. But then I'd remember all the hurt, the betrayal, and I'd force that guilt back down. Emily noticed, of course. She has this sixth sense for reading emotions. But we were building something good, something healthy, and I wasn't about to let Sarah's mess tarnish it. It got worse, though. Sarah's friends, the ones who'd egged her on to chase the high life with Mark, turned their backs on her. Fairweather friends, right? It's sad, watching someone you once loved become a ghost of their former self, all alone. Then Sarah started showing up. Yeah, at my usual spots, the coffee shop near work, the park where I jog on weekends. It was like she was haunting me, a living reminder of a past I was trying hard to move on from. She'd ask for help, money, a place to stay. It was heart-wrenching, but every time I saw her, I'd remember the pain she caused, and it made it easier to say no. But Emily, being the kind-hearted soul she is, suggested we help her. "Everyone deserves a second chance," she said. I admired her generosity, but it was too much. I couldn't bring myself to reach out to Sarah, not after everything. I told Emily it was a part of my life I needed to keep closed. She understood, or at least she tried to. I was torn, you know? Here was Emily, showing compassion to the woman who broke me, while I battled my conscience. But I had to protect what Emily and I were building. I couldn't drag her into the chaos that was Sarah's life. It's strange, feeling this mix of sympathy and resentment. Part of me wanted to help, but a bigger part was still healing from the scars Sarah left. I chose to focus on my life with Emily, on the future we were planning. It was hard, turning my back on someone I once loved, but sometimes, moving forward means leaving someone behind. So, I kept my distance, focusing on my job, my relationship with Emily, trying to ignore the guilt that gnawed at me whenever I saw Sarah. Life, huh? It throws these curveballs, testing you, pushing you. But in the end, it's the choices we make that define us. And I had made mine. Life has a way of throwing you into a whirlwind when you least expect it. Just as I was hitting my stride, the universe decided to toss a curveball my way. It started with news about Sarah. Her health was taking a nosedive. Living on the streets, battling stress, and who knows what else, it was taking a toll on her. It was hard to hear, even harder to process. This was someone I had loved, and now she was just a shadow, struggling to survive. But amidst the chaos, there was a silver lining for me. Work was going great, better than great, actually. I landed another promotion, recognition for all the late nights and early mornings I'd put in. My career was soaring, and it felt good, really good. It was like for every piece of bad news about Sarah, there was something positive happening in my life. Then, the news came that Sarah had been arrested for shoplifting. Food, essentials, basic stuff. It hit me hard. There she was, a woman who once had everything, now reduced to stealing to survive. Part of me wanted to rush to her aid, bail her out, do something. But another part, the part that still felt the sting of betrayal, held back. I wrestled with the decision, torn between the past and the present. Emily was a rock during this time, a sounding board for my conflicted emotions. We talked it through, and I decided not to bail Sarah out. It was one of the toughest decisions I've ever made, but I had to think about my own well-being, our well-being. Speaking of Emily, things between us were getting serious, really serious. We decided to move in together, start planning a future. It was a big step, but it felt right. We found this cozy place, not too big, not too small, just perfect for the two of us. Moving in with her, I felt like I was finally closing a painful chapter and starting a fresh one, filled with hope and promise. In the midst of this, I couldn't help but reflect on how our lives had diverged so drastically. Here I was, moving forward, building a life with Emily, while Sarah was lost, caught in a downward spiral. It was a stark reminder of how choices shape our paths, for better or worse. So, as Emily and I unpacked boxes and started making the place our own, I allowed myself to feel hopeful, to believe in a future that was bright and full of possibilities. It was a new beginning, a chance to leave the past and its shadows behind and step into the light of a new day. The contrast between my world and Sarah's was stark, but it was a reminder of the journey I'd been on, the growth and the changes. It was time to embrace this new chapter, with Emily by my side. Life's a roller coaster, they say. You never know what's around the next bend. Take the day Sarah got released, for instance. I heard about it from Alex, who's somehow always in the know. She looked nothing like the Sarah I remembered, frail, broken, a shadow of her former self. It was a shock, to say the least. Then, out of the blue, she showed up at my doorstep. There she was, the woman who'd turned my life upside down, looking like she'd been through a storm. She was begging, pleading for another chance, tears streaming down her face. It was a heart-wrenching scene, but my heart had grown tough, resilient. I told her I'd moved on. It was the truth. Emily and I were building something special, and I couldn't let Sarah tear that down. It was a hard thing to say, watching her crumble right there on my porch, but some bridges, once burnt, can't be rebuilt. Just when I thought things couldn't get more complicated, Jack entered the scene. This guy, a blast from Sarah's past, comes out of nowhere. Turns out, he was her first love, the one who got away, the one she'd always talked about with that distant look in her eyes. He disappeared years ago, leaving her heartbroken. And now, here he was, back from the void. Jack's timing was like something out of a soap opera, showing up just as Sarah hit rock bottom. He had this mysterious air about him, like he carried secrets in his pockets. I didn't trust him, but Sarah, she seemed to light up around him, a flicker of the old Sarah shining through. It was a strange feeling, watching them together. There was a part of me that felt relieved, like maybe Jack's return would give Sarah a new focus, a new reason to pull herself together. But another part of me was skeptical. People don't just show up out of the blue for no reason, especially not from someone's past like that. I kept my distance, watching this new chapter in Sarah's life unfold from afar. Emily and I, we had our own lives to live, our own future to build. But I couldn't help but keep an eye on the situation. Jack was an unknown variable, a piece of Sarah's past that had suddenly become a part of her present. As I watched them together, a mix of emotions churned inside me. There was a sense of closure, knowing that Sarah might have found someone from her past to connect with. Yet, there was also this nagging feeling, a question of what Jack's real intentions were. It was a reminder that life is full of surprises, some good, some bad, and sometimes, just downright confusing. Life's a funny thing, just when you think you've got it all figured out, it throws you a curveball. Take Sarah and Jack, for instance. Jack started showing up everywhere with Sarah, offering her the kind of support I hadn't seen in years. It was like he'd lit a spark in her that had long been extinguished. They were everywhere, laughing, holding hands, looking like a couple straight out of a rom-com. It should have made me happy, right? Seeing her getting back on her feet? But here's the kicker, I felt this weird twinge of jealousy. I know, crazy, right? After everything that had happened, after moving on with Emily, there I was, feeling jealous. It's not like I wanted Sarah back, but seeing her with Jack, so alive, it stirred up something old and familiar. I pushed those feelings down though, tried to focus on my own life. Speaking of my life, things with Emily hit a bit of a snag. Nothing major, just the usual stuff couples go through when the honeymoon phase starts wearing off. Little arguments here and there, misunderstandings, the kind of things that remind you relationships are work. It was normal, I guess, but against the backdrop of Sarah's newfound happiness, it felt amplified. Then one day, out of the blue, Sarah comes up to me. We're at the same coffee shop, by pure coincidence. She's with Jack, all smiles and sunshine, and she thanks me. Yeah, thanks me for all the indirect help I'd given her. Said that hitting rock bottom was what she needed to find herself again, to reconnect with Jack. It was surreal, hearing that from her, like I'd played a part in this script I didn't even know I was part of. It got me thinking about the paths we take in life. Here was Sarah, thanking me for a journey that had nearly broken me. And here I was, hitting a rough patch with Emily, wondering if every relationship was doomed to follow the same rocky road. The rest of the day was a blur. I couldn't shake off the encounter with Sarah. It made me reflect on my own life, my relationship with Emily. We had something good, something real, but it needed nurturing, care. It wasn't going to be all sunshine and rainbows, but maybe that was okay. Maybe that's what made it real, made it worth the effort. I went home that night, determined to work through the rough patch with Emily. Life's too short to dwell on what could have been, on old flames and faded memories. It's the here and now that counts, the path you're on, the people you choose to walk it with. Sarah had found her way back to Jack, and I had Emily, with all our imperfections and challenges. It was time to focus on that, to build something lasting, something real. Life might be unpredictable, but it's the surprises that make it worth living. Life's a maze, and sometimes you find yourself at a dead end, forced to backtrack. That's how I felt when things got rocky with Emily. My mind was a mess, a tangle of emotions I couldn't quite sort out. The whole thing with Sarah and Jack, it had thrown me for a loop. Emily sensed it, and tensions simmered between us, a silent undercurrent in our daily lives. Then the bombshell dropped. Jack, Mr. Knight in shining armor, turned out to be a con man. The guy was using Sarah, playing her for what little she had left after Mark's debacle. When the truth came out, it was like watching a car crash in slow motion. Sarah was devastated, betrayed yet again. It was painful to see, even from the sidelines. That revelation stirred something in me. Guilt, maybe? I couldn't help but feel responsible, in a twisted way. There I was, moving on, building a life with Emily, while Sarah's world crumbled around her. It made me question my choices, my path. Was I just lucky, or had I made the right decisions? Amidst this chaos, an opportunity landed in my lap. A major project abroad, the kind of career move people dream of. It was big, exciting, and terrifying all at once. But Emily, she was all for it. It'll be good for us, she said. A fresh start, away from all this drama. She was right, as usual. We needed something to shake us out of this rut, to rekindle the spark that had brought us together. But the decision wasn't easy. Uprooting our lives, stepping into the unknown, it was a leap of faith. Sarah's situation weighed on me, too. Despite everything, I felt a pull, a sense of responsibility for someone I'd once promised to cherish till death do us part. But life had other plans, and those vows were long broken. The more I thought about it, the more it made sense. This opportunity could be the fresh start Emily and I needed. A chance to focus on us, to build something new, away from the ghosts of my past. It was a chance to prove to Emily, and to myself, that I was committed to our future, to moving forward, together. So, after long nights of discussion, weighing pros and cons, we made the decision. We'd take the leap, embark on this new adventure. It felt like a weight had been lifted, a path cleared. I could see a future, bright and promising, on the horizon. As for Sarah, I hoped she'd find her way, just like I was trying to find mine. Life's a series of choices, each leading us down different paths. Sometimes those paths cross, intertwine, and then diverge again. It was time to embrace my path, with Emily by my side, stepping into a new chapter, a world of possibilities waiting to be discovered. Just when you think you've got your life on track, the past has a way of sneaking up on you. That's what happened the day before Emily and I were set to leave the country. My phone buzzed, and there was Sarah's name, flashing on the screen. She was reaching out, probably for the last time. Her voice message was filled with desperation, a plea for help, for connection, anything. But I couldn't do it, couldn't open that door again. It was the hardest thing, ignoring that message. Part of me wanted to help, out of old loyalty, maybe. But another part knew that some bridges, once burned, can't be rebuilt. I was starting a new life with Emily, and I couldn't drag the ghosts of my past along with us. So, I made the tough choice to leave without responding to Sarah's plea. The next day, as Emily and I packed our last boxes, there was this sense of finality, of leaving behind more than just a city. I caught a glimpse of Sarah from my window. She was wandering the streets, looking lost, a mere shadow of the woman she once was. It was a heart-wrenching sight, a stark reminder of how far we'd both come from the days we shared together. But it was her path, her choices that led her there, just as mine had led me here. The taxi ride to the airport was quiet, reflective. Emily held my hand, and in spoken support. She knew what was going through my mind, the turmoil of leaving Sarah in such a state. But she also understood the need to move forward, to not get pulled back into a whirlpool of past mistakes. As our plane took off, leaving the city and Sarah behind, I looked out the window, lost in thought. It was like watching the final scene of a movie, where the protagonist leaves it all behind, ready for a new adventure. Emily and we were starting a new chapter, in a new country, with new challenges and opportunities. It was exciting, scary, and liberating, all at once. But as I watched the city shrink into the distance, my thoughts lingered on Sarah. Her life, once intertwined with mine, now a cautionary tale of loss and regret. It made me think about the consequences of our choices, how each decision shapes our paths in ways we can't always foresee. Life is a series of crossroads, each path leading to a different destination. Sarah's path led her down a road of heartache and loss, a result of choices made and paths taken. Mine led me to a new beginning with Emily, a chance to build a life based on love, trust, and shared dreams. As Sarah's figure faded into the city's backdrop, I realized that our story was a lesson in choices and consequences. It was a reminder to cherish what you have, to make decisions wisely, and always look forward, even when the past tries to pull you back. In the end, it's the paths we choose that define us, for better or worse. And as the plane soared higher, I was ready to embrace whatever lay ahead, with Emily by my side, and the past firmly